Ash and Sam, thanks for joining us today. It's a really exciting time, not long out from tournament kickoff, and really glad to have, I reckon, as good a panel as I possibly could have to chat through this today. So nice to see you again, Ash, since we spoke last year. How are you travelling?
Hey Dave, yeah, I'm good. I'm excited for another home tournament. I could really get used to major tournaments being played on home soil every couple of years.
Couldn't we ever? We are spoiled. We've got to tell the kids out there we are getting spoiled. This doesn't happen every day. And Sam, great to have you aboard. You've written some stuff for us, some brilliant stuff for us. We're really glad to have you back in the game from contributing from a journalism sense. How are you travelling, and how did you enjoy being back out in the Matildas beat this morning?
Yeah, thanks for having me. Absolutely. It's so nice seeing old faces like yours, Dave. It's great seeing you as
I'm
well,
not that old.
Ash.
I'm not that old.
Old friends, old friends. Yeah, no, it's fabulous. And now, 10, 11 days out from kickoff, my God, suddenly it's happening. It feels like the Women's World Cup all over again, where there wasn't really anything happening in the lead up, and then suddenly it all was. So yeah, I'm super excited for it all to kick off.
Brilliant. Well, let's get stuck into it. When I say where we were this morning, Sam, we're recording on Thursday. We're both at Joe Montemurro's press conference out at Combank Stadium, where we talked through the 26-player squad that was announced last night. Ash, to you first, just your general thoughts, your reaction to the group that was announced that will, go for a first bit of Asian Cup silverware in 16 years over the next month.
Yeah, it's pretty challenging when you put it in those terms, isn't it? But I think it's a strong squad. Not too many surprises, sort of what we were expecting from it, and solid representation from all of our stars. Whether or not they're all match fit is probably the biggest question, but I think it's a really good representation, a nice balance between people who have been there for a long time and the up and comers who have been getting some really solid game time and performances under their belt.
Sam?
Yeah, absolutely. Balance is sort of the key word. I think that was something that Joe Montemurro really emphasised in his media conference this morning. It's been I think a really difficult process for them, but one that I think is really encouraging. We're seeing 8 players who have never played in an Asian Cup before be called up for this tournament, which is extremely exciting. And players who you maybe really didn't even think were on the shortlist have been called into the squad as well. I'm thinking like a Jada Weiner, who was injured for the past 2 windows and so didn't come into camp. A Carly Johnson, who was sort of on the periphery, on the fringes, on the edges. A bunch of sort of younger players, fringe players, Alex Chidiac coming back out from the cold, what a wonderful reward for her perseverance and her bravery in moving overseas once again to try and get some club football minutes. I think it's a really exciting squad. It's a squad that has 1 foot in the now, 1 foot in we need to try and win this Asian Cup with the best talent possible, but also 1 foot in the future. And when I spoke to assistant coach Emily Husband after the official press conference, she said that they very much are thinking ahead to the Women's World Cup in Brazil in 2027. And so this is a good launch pad for some of these younger players to get big tournament experience in the hopes that they will be the players to carry the Matildas brand forward.
That's one of the key subplots this tournament. I think it's probably flown under the radar with a lot of people that it does double as World Cup qualification. So the stakes for not just the Matildas, but a lot of these nations is absolutely massive as well. So that theme of balance is something I want to touch on through the show today, because my initial take on the squad when I saw it last night was it's that mix of that generation that is going for that silverware that's eluded them for so long, with a mix of the players you just mentioned, Sam, who there's 8 debutants. But I don't know if you got the same sense this morning, and let's just sort of touch on the presser. They're coming in, they're not coming in with experience at this level, but they're coming in with form, they're coming in with confidence, they're coming with match minutes overseas. Did you sense that bullishness from Joe this morning and that confidence from his discussions?
Absolutely. And it makes a lot of sense, right? Because when you think about the really short window that they have to prepare for this tournament, the players are still overseas. They're not going to arrive in Australia until probably over the weekend or maybe even early next week. And the tournament kicks off on the 1st of March. So there's not a huge amount of time for them to actually come to fitness. There's not a huge amount of time for them to do a lot of sort of tactical or technical preparation. It's really just about getting over the jet lag, as Joe mentioned, and making sure that they're all fit and ready. And so when when you think about the squad selection in the context of a tournament like this, you really want players who are in the middle of their seasons or who are in like quite deep into their pre-seasons, which we're seeing over the course of this squad selection. So their bodies are ready for this, because tournament football, as you know, Ash, the turnarounds are so tight, and with the huge amount of travel that the Matildas are going to have to do between Perth, the Gold Coast, Sydney, potentially back to Perth again if they finish second in their group, you know, you're going to have to go deep into a squad like this. You're going to have to use your bench. You're going to have to rotate. And so drawing on players who are already playing at quite a high level, playing regular match minutes, maybe not at the best clubs in the world, but they're playing regularly in very competitive environments and training really well as well. So like all of those factors taken into account, I think makes this squad make complete sense.
Yeah, I'd say that was my biggest question mark, right? Like you need a squad that's going to get the job done. They desperately need to finish very least semi-finalists for the World Cup next year. But there are some question marks over some of the players that we would say have been our like traditional stars of the recent years, like Kyra Cooney-Cross. Unfortunately, he's got terrible personal circumstances at the moment and hasn't been getting much game time with Arsenal after just breaking back into that starting lineup for them. Mary Fowler, injury, Sam Kerr, injury, and then a bunch of the players coming up through the ranks that are playing in America or Sweden who have just sort of coming into their seasons. They haven't really played much. So I think a balance of the squad is going to have to be really, really important in how he rotates players, because you can't rely anymore on Sam Kerr playing 90 minutes and digging us out of holes at any point in those games. So, you know, you're going to have some of these players in the squad stand up and perform at a big level.
Stay tuned if you're listening to this, because we are going to go position by position, and there's some really interesting combinations I actually want to find out about. But looking at it in total, if you think about 2023, there was probably a gulf between, all right, these are the goals that are going to get minutes, and if there's injuries to those, we're really digging into another tier. And I look at this and go, I looked at those 8 tournament debutants and I went, I don't actually see them as debutants. I see them as actually viable options who might actually cause a joker in the pack in terms of the starting 11. Do you think the depth, and we were worried about the depth, right, over the last 2 years, and suddenly, would it be right to say that the depth of this squad, Ash, is and then your take, Sam, is I mean, has it actually advanced on the squad from 2 years ago or 2.5 years ago?
I think so. I think that some of these players that have been slowly building, I mean, like if you take Winona Heatley, for example, putting an enormous amount of pressure on being the starting centre-back or one of the starting centre-backs in this lineup, or in the midfield if she needs to, you know. In 2022, she was just a travelling member of the squad. So she would have experienced some of that, you know, what it's like to be involved in that tournament. But you know, this time around, she's very much in the picture to be a starting player. And there's a few others. McNamara as well kind of falls into that same section. So I feel like, even though, I feel like the squad's in a better position than it was in 2022, personally, in terms of players in form, you know, depth of the squad. You can sort of mix it up. If you see, we are going to do the starting 11 later, but if you see how many names have been crossed out on my piece of paper when I'm trying to put it together, you know, even I've got no idea what it's going to look like or what the best formation might be, or, you know, combination of players. So I imagine it's a great problem for Joe Montemurro to have, is, you know, more players to pick from than just a starting 11.
100%, Ash. And I think in addition to that as well, like what we saw under Tony Gustafsson was a really rigid subscription to a particular starting 11. It was a really particular style of play that he wanted, a really particular system. And there weren't really that many players outside of his sort of top, you know, 14, 15 who were really capable of doing that. But I think what's really exciting and encouraging about Joe Montemurro is that he does seem to be more tactically flexible, and he even described his style of football today as very fluid. Like, he's reactive to what's happening in front of him. He tries to encourage his players to learn and to adapt on the fly. And I think the decision-making that's gone into the player selections and calling up particular players for camps over the past 6 months has really helped them to understand that and helped them to connect with and create chemistry with those usual core players that we're likely to see. But they're not coming in completely cold. They're not coming in not knowing what to do. They're coming in having already been exposed to the environment, already knowing the players. And I'm thinking of a Heatley, I'm thinking of a Claire Hunt, I'm thinking of a Caitlin Torpey, even thinking of an Amy Sayer. This is going to be her first Asian Cup, but we've seen her heaps over the past year. So they're not coming in from absolutely nowhere. They've been drip fed into the Matildas team over the past couple of windows. And they've used those windows, I think, really strategically for that purpose, to make sure that those players have those games under their belt and they really understand the level that's required and the expectations of the squad as well. So, yeah, I think it's really great. I think that the depth this year definitely feels it gives me a sense of comfort more than it did not just at the Women's World Cup in 23, but at the Asian Cup in 2022 as well in India, where we really were exposed in terms of our lack of depth in particular positions. I'm really looking forward to it. And I think a big part of this also is going to involve how adaptable and how flexible Jo is in terms of the opponents, because each opponent is different, right? You're going to need to have a slightly different style, a slightly different lineup depending on the opponent that you're facing. And so when we come up against a Philippines versus an Iran versus a South Korea, that's going to require slightly different things from the Matildas. And so hopefully Jo and the team are flexible enough and they have enough confidence in themselves and the systems that they're used to that they're going to be able to go into each of those games feeling fully confident no matter what the lineup is.
Ash, before we get into the nuts and bolts of the positions themselves, I just want a player's point of view on this. The theory of it instills me with a lot of confidence. Then the reality is Jo's had how many camps? A couple of camps. It's really only been 6 or 7 months and there's 10 days till kickoff. So as a player, what's it like over the next period? What has to be done over the next period to have all these really, what seem very clear ideas, looked really embedded against New Zealand, but not so much against England? What happens over the next 10 days to take everything we've said, which all sounds lovely, and put it to practice in terms of these ideas and this philosophy?
It's an enormous challenge. And, we're talking the dark ages here when I was still playing, but at that point in time, club football wasn't as much of a feature. So you had more time in preparation in camp to sort of get you embed or everything that you wanted to do prior to the tournament. And that's not the reality for a lot of these players these days, which is fantastic. I'm a massive fan of it, but it is the big test. And I feel like it's that age-old thing. If things are going well, if they're on top in a game against the Philippines and things click and things work well, they'll get a lot of confidence from that and they'll sail through. But as soon as you come up against a block, something that's not quite working, questions, doubts start coming into players' minds. Oh, is this working? Should I be doing something else? Because it's not as automatic as what it might be. There's not as much flow in the first little while as you're getting used to systems. So it is a massive challenge. And I mean, all we can hope for is something like, the players are very experienced. They know how to get over these hurdles and the coaching staff is amazing. But, the Women's World Cup in 2023 showed if you can get some momentum, you can go a long, long way in the tournament like the Matildas did at that time. And there were question marks over that squad heading into that tournament as well. So I feel like this team knows what it's like to play home tournament football now. And if they get some confidence and momentum, they're going to be hard to stop. It's just problem solving that's the next issue, I would say.
Well, Sam, Mary Fowler was the headline. Like if you go do a quick scrub of Google, clearly that was most of the headlines across the country. The beauty of Football 360 and the women's game is we've got a whole platform to fill. So we're going to go right down into the weeds. But for you, is she the biggest in, or what was the biggest in when you saw the squad yesterday?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, she's the most high profile in, absolutely. And, what I found really interesting in Joe Montemurro's press conference was that he said one of his sort of guiding principles of selection was match fitness. He didn't want to draw upon players who hadn't demonstrated that they were, ready to play tournament football. And I was like, hold on a second, because there's one particular exception to that rule, isn't there? But it makes sense, right? Mary Fowler is a generational player, and the fact that she has managed to get back to playing football with Manchester City, 9 months after tearing her ACL, she's done everything correctly, everything well in terms of her rehab. She's already back at that level. like that's a pretty telling sign that this is someone whose body is not only getting to the place it needs to be, but her mindset. You know, like she is so committed and she has such perseverance in order to position herself in a way that she's going to get the maximum out of what she can do. And, you know, I think back to 2023 when Kaya Simon was called up for the squad and there were a lot of question marks around her because she'd only just returned from an ACL as well. The way that her position was sort of framed in that conversation was that she could be an impact player, someone who comes in for the last 10 or 15 minutes, someone who comes on in a penalty shootout. I have full faith that Mary Fowler can take any of those pockets of time, any of those big moments, and be absolutely sensational, as we saw in 2023 as well. But I think the really good thing about the squad and the work that's been done in Fowler's absence, similar to when Sam Kerr and Ellie Carpenter were both off the field with injuries, is that it's given other players opportunities to step up. So we've seen a Carly Johnson, for example, who's been playing as a winger over a couple of windows, come in and really light things on fire. We've seen a Caitlin Torpey, you know, we've seen an Amy Sayer. There are lots of different sort of positions that a Mary Fowler type player can fill, but there really only is one Mary Fowler. So it's not a shock to me that she's sort of the headline act of the selections at the moment.
I would jump in there, Sam, and say there's rules and then there's exceptions to the rules. And Mary Fowler is one of those, right? Like she's an absolute superstar. So I feel like she's that one there. The big thing is, you know, he's left a few players out who are also struggling with injuries and other things. So, you know, she's obviously been considered enough to be in a position to play physically and mentally, and then enough to take a risk on if she hasn't got that match fitness, right? For me, the biggest thing was Alex Chidiac. Like, so happy for her. You mentioned her at the start, Sam. Like, I think it's fantastic that she's back in the squad. Hasn't had as many international windows with the team, but I don't think that's going to be an issue. She plays her style no matter what. And I feel like she's great cover for us in the midfield area where there are a few question marks over the sort of creative hub of the midfield. You know, Cara Cooney-Cross, a little bit of a question mark. Mary Fowler, a little bit of a question mark. So I feel like she's our sort of option that fills that space there for us. So, you know, that's fantastic to see her there. And I think it shows that how considered they are with the whole squad selection as a whole, knowing the ins and outs and what may or may not happen with their players. They know they'll be checking in with them constantly, so they know where they all are.
100%. And the other player that I wanted to mention who I am so thrilled for is Charlie Rule, a player who really no one paid any kind of attention to. She was playing at Sydney FC for a while, made a huge and risky leap to go over and play with Brighton and Hove Albion in the WSL in England under Daria Vidicic, and now, you know, is a starting player for their side, a centre-back who can also play as a sort of right or left-sided fullback, been playing consistently, starting consistently, and has come such a long way. Like, I remember the wafer-thin Charlie Rule lining up for Sydney FC as a winger or as a forward sometimes. So even when she was in the sort of the youth national teams, she was this paper-thin little whippet player, and now she's really evolving into a very calm, very technically gifted central defender. So I think that's a really inspired selection as well. I think maybe for the first time in my fandom of the Matildas, I can say that I am not terrified about our defensive line. I actually feel really calm and good about it. What a concept.
Well, I put Charlie Rule into the list of when I looked at the 8 debutantes and I said, great. Like, this is what you want. You want players. The Socceroos want that level of player coming through it overseas and knocking on the door with those cases. So that's a great example and great shout out. And Chidiac, Joe Montemurro, I asked him about her this morning as well. So we'll touch on that in midfield. Otherwise, we'll never get there. I'm going to hold those thoughts for a little bit later, because biggest in, biggest out. Sam, the headline with Fowler was Charlie Grant. So for the player who was given the last minute, Charlie unfortunately didn't meet the clock. Were there any other surprising omissions alongside that? And what did you make of that omission as well?
Yeah, Charlie Grant is the biggest one, I think, given her sort of ongoing presence in the Matildas, like particularly since Ellie Carpenter went down with her ACL a couple of years ago. Charlie Grant stepped up into that position so beautifully, and I think really took a lot of people by surprise with how well she was able to fill that gap. But going back to what we mentioned earlier about, you know, the guiding principles for Jo in terms of these selections, Charlie just hasn't been playing. She's over at Tottenham. She's been on the bench a lot. And now she's been injured. And Jo said to me afterwards that he just hadn't seen enough proof from her that she was ready to go. But she would have been one of those players who was really on the edge of selection, you know, like that's probably maybe 3 or 4 players who were really tough luck to miss out on being selected. There was just 1 or 2 little things that ended up sort of putting them over the edge compared to others. And Charlie was one. Courtney Vine is another. I was expecting her to get a call up, perhaps a little bit more than Carly Johnson, just based on the fact that she has big tournament experience, you know, like famously scored the penalty at the Women's World Cup against France, and knows how to sort of embrace a moment like that, and knows how it feels to play a major tournament on home soil. But given her personal circumstances and maybe just not really being ready in terms of match fitness, because she's in preseason with North Carolina Courage over in America, maybe also was one of those players who was just sort of on the edge that didn't quite get up. But in terms of other, I guess, absences, the only one that sticks out to me is Chloe Lincoln, the goalkeeper, who had been called up to the Matildas over the last couple of windows, currently playing and starting regularly for Brisbane Roar. I think is absolutely in frame to be a future number 1 Matildas goalkeeper. And yeah, like I'd had Jada Wyman on my sort of long list, but I didn't realize that she was so close to the top of that long list, you know, and so seeing her get a call up is so wonderful. It is such a wonderful reward for her, her taking her shot and moving overseas to AIK, where she's apparently been performing really well, and injury has been the only thing that's kept her out of the last couple of windows. But no doubt the assistant coaches and the other sort of staff members of the Matildas have been keeping a close eye on her, as well as a bunch of other players who maybe come as a shock to us on the outside, but probably are not very surprising to those who made the decisions.
Yeah, totally. I think you've stolen all of my players, Sam. They're the ones that come front to mind. I think Tamika Yallop obviously was never going to make it after a hamstring injury, so that's just a big out for the squad, not having her experience in there. But yeah, I'm a big fan of Chloe Lincoln. I thought she was going to get into that third goalkeeper spot, but you know, not a bad third option as well. Goalkeepers, like the back line, it's nice to have a lot of options in that area, and that one was quite competitive too.
Well, let's continue on that theme, because the number 3 was competitive, but I don't think we've got any clue on who the number 1 is going to be either, do we, Ash? Jo might know, but we don't know.
Jo might know. We don't know. Are we jumping into our 11 now? Who would I pick?
Well, we can frame it as the 11, but I also want to, these are almost tournament preview questions, the things that we're kind of going to spend the next 10 days thinking about and talking about and dissecting the value of the squad.
Yeah, you know what? I think with the goalkeeper question, I think it might be something that's shared even between the two of them. In the group stages, they've maybe both given an opportunity in those early games, a game each, and then as they move through, they might decide which one they prefer, to be honest. You know, like Tegan Mike has missed probably the last 5 games with Leon, Mackenzie Arnold's in pre-season, so you haven't really got recent data to say who's in better form right at this minute, and I feel like they ended 2025 in that exact same position. So I mean, I have Arnold down at the moment just because of her, you know, big game experience, tournament experience, but I mean, it's anyone's guess at this stage who's going to roll out against the Philippines in 10 days.
Yeah, totally. But that's like, what a luxury to have, you know, like 2 goalkeepers who are just as capable as each other of stepping into that position. You don't want there to be a huge cliff in terms of your goalkeepers, because you've got a number 1 that's been there forever and has all the experience and has all the knowledge and all the skills, and then suddenly that player gets injured, or that player is ill, or that player is unavailable, and you have to go to your second choice, and you know, like that's a huge dilemma. So I think, we're in like a really great place, I think, in having both Mackenzie Arnold and Tegan Micah vying for the first position. But as I mentioned before, like I really think it depends on the opponent. I think it'll be smart to rotate between those 2 goalkeepers based on their profiles as goalkeepers, because each has got particular kinds of skill sets that are stronger and weaker compared to the other. You know, like Mackenzie Arnold is an incredible penalty shot stopper, right? And so she's the kind of goalkeeper that you would want towards the pointy end of the tournament, where penalty shootouts become more likely. But a Tegan Micah, for example, has really great distribution with her feet. And even though she hasn't necessarily been playing regularly for Lyon, whenever she comes in and performs for Australia, you see that skill set. You see what she's capable of, and you see the way that the Matildas start their attacks with her distribution. So I think it'll really depend on the type of opponent that the Australia are going to be coming up against and the type of goalkeeper skill set that's going to be required that Joe particularly wants.
I hope we can whittle down to an answer quickly. I tried this exercise with Daniel Garb and Eric Pardley for the Socceroos earlier this week. It was a squad, not a team. But we'd got this far and we landed on a consensus of 5 goalkeepers, which was a terrible start to the show. It went backwards from there, trying to whittle it down. This should be the easiest one. If there was a final tomorrow, can you pick one? Can you put? I'll go. I just have a feeling it might be Tegan Micah, but that's just a gut feeling. Just I don't know. Just the fact that it is, once you are allowing it to be 50-50, like, I feel like there's an opportunity for her to take that spot, which was Mackenzie Arnold's in previous tournaments.
You might be right, Dave. Mine is Arnold, just because of the 2023 World Cup. She's getting a lot of mileage out of that. But I know we're probably looking towards the future.
The books are good. I've read them with my kids. They're good books.
But yeah, I'm going with Macca, a known quantity in tournament football.
Yeah, I think I agree with Ash. Like, my heart says Tegan Micah because I love her style as a goalkeeper, but my head says Mackenzie Arnold because she knows how it feels to step up in a big moment. And I think in an Asian Cup final, if it's a penalty shootout against Japan, I don't think there is anyone else in the country that fans would want to be between those posts than Mackenzie Arnold.
That's a great point.
Yeah, and knowing her a little bit, like, she will rise to that occasion. She'd be so keen. If she gets a hint that anyone's doubting her, it's going to take her to the next level.
Yeah, I knew it was about. See, 1-on-1 we could call it. I've just been defeated 2-1. So all right, we'll try pick it up from here. I find the defense fascinating for a couple of reasons. We know Ellie Carpenter's got one spot. There's no doubt about that. But there's so much versatility, and so much of it hints around Steph Catley's position in this cohort too. Do you guys have a whiff of which way it might go? Ash, does it all pivot on where Catley plays?
I think so. That changes a lot of things, right? Like, whether she plays left back or centre back then affects whether Heatley's getting a run or not, and whether, who plays left back. That's always been the question in the past. If Catley doesn't play left back, who plays left back? Because there's not many other as good options. But I think we're in a different position now compared to the past, and she's played so well in that position at centre back. So, for me, actually, it was kind of easy, like really clear if I was picking the squad, and I'm not, and I didn't get to speak to Joe, so I don't know what he's thinking. But if I was picking a back four, I would go Carpenter, Hunt, Catley, Torpy. And for me, that was so, like, felt so good about it, just write it down, bam, that's our back four. I felt, I'm not even going to justify it, Dave. Like, that's it. That's the back four.
Well,
I love that.
That's great for the brevity of this podcast, because we could have gone on for hours on that. So, Sam, are you going to keep it tight?
No, I'm not going to keep it tight. No. I think for me, like, it really depends on, like, are we going to use a back four? I think that's the first sort of, like, fundamental question here. Because if we don't use a back four, if we use maybe more of a back three, who sits into those positions where you then have an Ellie Carpenter who's playing as a sort of like wing back, like a right-sided wing back, and then a left-sided wing back, like a sort of winger come fullback type of. So like it really depends, I think, on the system that Joe wants to play. If we're going with a back four, I agree with 3 out of 4 of Ash's choices. I don't think I'd go with Caitlin Torpy as a left back. I think I would probably go with a Courtney Nevin, just because she's left-footed and is very good over set pieces. So I think like the particular sort of qualities that Steph Catley has as a left back in terms of her left-footedness, her ability to bomb forward and connect with players up the field and to whip in those left-footed crosses, I think is like quite a significant part of the Matildas' attacking style. So if they're wanting to maintain that, I think Courtney Nevin offers maybe a better profile of option there. But if we're going with a back three, I absolutely see a Claire Hunt, a Steph Catley, and a Winona Heatley. as being that back three. Maybe a Charlie Rule coming in for the last 20 minutes, who's also been playing in a back three with Brighton. I feel very comfortable and solid with that kind of arrangement, hopefully. And Ellie Carpenter is there forever. She will never die.
She's not moving, yeah. I think, if we're playing back five, Sam gets to pick the back line. If we're playing back four, I'll pick it. That seems like what we've come to.
What do you think it'll be? What do you think it'll be?
It's so tough because...
the opponent.
Yeah.
Is it the opponent? Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. I feel like a back five suits our players that play in the back line really well. Ellie up bombing forward, or Courtney Nevin, or Torpy up on the left. But whether it suits the overall team, I'm not so sure.
The other thing is he, in almost every press conference, he did again today, he singled out Winona Heatley. Massive fan of her, and rightly so. So I just suspect or wonder, that she'll be in that 11. But also, you have three very, very good centre backs if you decide to go that way too. So by the end, Sam, you're gonna have to choose a formation. Ash has gone with a 4. You've gone with a 5. So by the end, we're gonna have to get a graphic out of this. So you're gonna have to choose which one you're gonna, or we can have your A/B team as well. We can do that too. We'll see how we go. I'm also really curious about midfield. It was interesting today. I got a little bit stitched up during the press conference because as I asked my question, the ball on the table just started swirling, and Joe played with it like he had absolutely no interest in my question. He answered it really well, so he was listening. But at the end of it, he caught the ball and said, "See, just like I always I like to keep possession of the ball." And it was a great one-liner. And he's picked a squad of players that are going to be able to do that for him. But you touched on it a bit earlier, Ash. Kaya Cooney-Cross, Mary Fowler. So I want to start with this discussion by asking, as a centerpiece of this, is Claire Wheeler in the 11 or is she not? And then maybe we can work out how that follows on to the 8 and 10 positions after that.
Have you been reading my notes, Dave? Because that's what I ended up settling on was...
How good's that?
How good. Was play Claire Wheeler as the 6, right? And you're not sure about some of the others, and that frees you up to play Gorry as that 8, doing a little bit more box-to-box stuff. She's very creative. She can ball play as well as be defensive. So that's where I got to after much toing and froing. If you ask me in an hour what the formation will be or who's playing, it'll change again. And then I'll leave the 10 open for discussion for now.
You can when we put your team out, you can comment on it if you've changed your mind.
Yep.
It's a nice. I like this discussion, Sam, because it's a bit in the nerdy areas, but in terms of tactics, it's fascinating.
Totally. And I love midfield conversations. I am a lopey, slow midfielder in Sunday League. And so anything to do with the midfield, I am all over. So I love that answer, Ash. I love the sort of the knock-on effect of a decision like that. And the number 6, the defensive midfielder, is actually one of the most important positions in an entire team, right? They are the pivot point for so much of what happens around them. And they're the first line of defense and the first line of attack in lots of different ways. They need to be the engine room of a team on the field. And so I think we've got 2 players who are very capable of being that engine, who you've just mentioned, Claire Wheeler and Katrina Gorry. The 2 of them are playing regularly for their clubs. Gorry is the captain of West Ham. They're not doing great, but not necessarily because of her. And Wheeler has also been the captain of Everton. These are players who are in leadership positions. They've shown over multiple windows that they are more than capable of playing in that particular pivot role. But I think it's about chemistry and who they connect with around them. So because of that, I would maybe wonder whether a Katrina Gorry number 6 is preferred, at least for a couple of games, just to sort of see how she works, particularly if Cara Cooney-Cross comes back into the starting 11. Despite the fact she hasn't been playing much for Arsenal, the chemistry that they have developed as a unit is almost unmatched in the Matildas. We saw how brilliantly they worked together during the Women's World Cup. We've seen them reconnect and rekindle that relationship in previous windows in friendlies. So do you maybe compromise that by bringing in a Wheeler and then having to sort of shuffle them around a little bit? Or do you have Kara Cooney-Cross as the number 10? Do you have a Wheeler at defensive midfield, Katrina Gorry as the box-to-box, and then Cooney-Cross as the number 10 with that incredible ability to shoot from distance, as we saw against New Zealand? You know, like, all these players have such amazing qualities. It's just about how you balance them all together in that space and the kinds of qualities you want to emphasize.
That's where I found the Chidiac inclusion really interesting for a couple of reasons. One is going into end of last year, I think Montemurro spoke about the need to have a Tamika Yallop style player who could break through, and it doesn't have that anymore. So clearly there was a position in the squad. Chidiac different, but also we're going to be playing against deep defences. So what if you've gone 60 minutes and it is one of the combinations you've just said, and you go, right, we've got to come up with something else here. We've got to find some magic or find an X factor. So this is a two-part question. One is in the context of Mary Fowler, because where does she fit into all of this? And is it a lot? Sort of the headlines this morning that said Matilda's take Fowler risk. I kind of see it as a Fowler bonus, that as in with these options here, you're not building the team around her, but is she a solution in this area? And then where does Chidiac fit in all of that? If you made any sense of that question, well done. But if you didn't, I'll ask it again.
Totally. I love that reframing, Dave, of Fowler being like a bonus player, because she is, right? Like, the fact that she's returned from her ACL to be
she's not
even
starting the first
considered.
game. Like, there's no Fowler conundrum like in the past, like, because you're not building the team around her.
Exactly right. And like, that's great, right? We like, it's I think in the past, the Matildas have very much erred on the side of, we have this incredible one player talent, let's try and build everything around them and like rely on them heavily. I think that's what happened in 2022, the Women's Asian Cup, and Sam Kerr was that player, right? If Sam Kerr wasn't firing, nothing happened. And that loss against South Korea in the quarterfinal, she had like 4 or 5 shots, a bunch of them hit the post, and no one else had a chance. And that's what happened. And then we lost 1-0. So I think it's always really risky to build a team around a single player, because so much depends on them, A, being fit, and B, being able to do what you want them to do. And so I think where we've found ourselves now is that with Fowler being an impact player, really, like being this bonus player, she can come on in these moments where maybe the starting 11 have tried everything that they can and they need someone who's got something different. And that's where I think not just Fowler, but Chidiac are also those really interesting, different profile of creative attacking midfielder who you need to come in and crack open a deep lying defence, who you need to come in and execute that perfect pass. I think Amy Sayer fits into that bracket as well. Those 3 players for me, not only are they versatile, but they have a quality and a creativity and a vision that I don't think any other Matildas have at the moment. So if you've got all 3 of them sort of in the mix to be able to come in later on in games, starting games, being able to move them across the front 3 or in attacking midfield, there's so much versatility there, and there are so many different weapons that they have at their disposal that you're going to be able to utilise and rotate throughout the course of the tournament. Because I think that's going to be the biggest thing, is how well does Montemurro rotate and click together all these different combinations of players, so that when crunch time arrives, we are like raring to go. Not like the Women's World Cup where every player was absolutely exhausted and run into the ground when they got to the game that really mattered. We want them to be ready and having the energy and the spark when it's most necessary.
Yeah, exactly. And being able to use lots of different combinations through the tournament should get you there, right? The midfield's hard. The balance is hard. I feel like without at risk of being insulting to some really, really good quality players here, there's something missing in the mix of the players that we have in the midfield, and you've touched on it already, and it's the ability to be like line breaking, forward running, change of pace midfielder, because we've got lots of, workhorses. They can tick over, they can create, they can be in the right position, but do they have a change of pace that's going to, break through defences and break through defensive lines if we need them to? I think we saw Kara Cooney-Cross trying to do that in some of the friendlies recently, the inside-out runs that they were trying to get her to do. So I'm not saying that they're not athletic or they don't have that ability to do those things. I kind of wonder with the balance here, who is going to be that player in the midfield for them. And that's why ultimately in my midfield, I chose Emily Van Egmond because she does have that really good link with the front three, potential front three. I feel like, she's even been played up there recently as well. So I feel like something that will connect not just the midfield with the defensive line, but the midfield with the front line is playing Emily as that 10 and someone that's going to move around a little bit differently to some of the other options that we have in the midfield. I don't know. You can
Go on, Sam.
agree or disagree.
Oh, this is going to be the biggest bone of contention on this podcast, I think. I think folks who have sort of followed my other podcast, The Far Post, will know that I haven't been the biggest fan of Emily Van Egmond for a little while. And it all, for me, boils down to speed. I think one of the things that makes the Matildas who they are is that they play in a really dynamic, fast, sort of reactive and proactive way. Emily Van Egmond is a very different style of midfielder than that kind of bigger system requires. I think when I've watched her over the course of her club career and in the last couple of years with the Matildas, she just is a beat too slow for me. And sometimes that's good. Sometimes you need that. You need someone to sort of reset the tempo, control things, bring them down a notch, and you want them to be able to come back to an even keel. And I think Van Egmond has the ability to do that. Obviously, we know that she has an incredible ability to pass a ball. She's got really good vision. And sometimes in these big tournament moments, she has come up trumps. Like she has performed the pass. She has scored the goal that has been, the be all and end all. But I think for me, given the other kinds of profiles of midfielders we have and the kind of football that it feels like Montemurro is wanting to play, Van Egmond doesn't seem to fit into that system for me. I'm going to be really interested to see how her role does or doesn't change in terms of this. But I think her, in addition to Alana Kennedy, I'll be brutally honest, they're just not at the speed I think that's required for the kind of midfield that I reckon Joe wants.
To play devil's advocate, then Sam,
Go on.
who screams speed to you from the midfield?
I mean, Amy Sayer. I think Amy Sayer is, even though we've seen her maybe more play as a left winger over the last few windows, she has the ability, I think, to be that line-breaking, attacking midfielder. She's tall, she's pacey, she's dynamic. I think she has a really good vision. She sees a gap. Tamika Yallop, I think it is the perfect sort of utopian ideal of that style of player. But who do you turn to next when you don't have her available? And I think Amy's probably the best option.
Or you play one of the other forwards maybe a little bit deeper if you want something that's going to do that. I'm not sure.
Yeah. Sam Kerr is another great example. She is an excellent line-breaking player. Even before she became sort of a more traditional sort of on-the-shoulder number 9, when she was still playing in the A-League Women, she would drop a little bit deeper. She started out as a winger, for God's sake. Like, she knows how to run off and through players. So, yeah, again, depending on the kind of system Joe wants to play, depending on the opponent, all these things depending. I think there are a number of options in the squad who are able to perform that function.
And maybe you don't need that from one of your midfielders if you play like a back five with bombing on, wing backs. You've got that sort of thing happening around the outside of them. So, yeah, it's so interesting. So interesting.
I'm not saying anything. You guys keep going. That was great. I think the other context is as well is that's a real discussion in isolation. So what's ahead of them? So we know Sam Kerr's ahead of them. We know Caitlin Ford has to be ahead of them because Caitlin Ford's arguably in the form of anyone in Australian football anywhere at the moment. Who is the third player? Is Hayley Raso a lock still, or is that where Amy Sayer comes in? Is that where you tinker with what we just spoke about?
For me, yeah, that front three is still a lock, Raso, Kerr, Ford. But I feel like Ford's the most important out of all of them for our chances in the tournament. She's been a star. Something that's really, really, I cannot wait to see them try again is if Sam's not starting, play Caitlin as the 9, because I loved seeing her there. Or if they play a front 2 with a back 5, them playing together up front, that sort of thing. So, I'm really, really interested in how they use those players. I don't think you're too far off the mark with Amy Sayer potentially playing out there, or Holly McNamara potentially being one of the starters out there either. But yeah, for me, that one still feels pretty solid as to who their preferred options might be to start.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I also agree that Caitlin Ford is like almost more important to the Matildas now than Sam Kerr is, particularly during the World Cup. Like when Sam Kerr was injured, Caitlin Ford carried that team. You know, she did so much work. And even though she's not maybe playing as many minutes with Arsenal as what she'd like, every time she gets on the field, she does something. She affects something. She changes something. She creates chances. Like it's not just her running ability, but it's her balance. It's her dribbling. It's her ability to cut inside and shoot. She can run to the baseline and cut a ball back. Like she's so creative and she's such a weapon when she's in that particular position. But as you mentioned, Ash, like she can also come inside and play as a 9. And her and Sam Kerr, they've been playing in the Matildas for over a decade. They've got such an understanding about how to shift and shape around each other and how to bring the best out of one another as well. Their communication is off the charts. They just work so well together. So I think that combination will be really important. And yeah, Hayley Rasso, like, I don't know what it is, but every time she puts on a Matilda's shirt, she just becomes God. Like, where does she come from? Like, not necessarily performing particularly well at club level, but she comes into the national team and she just, like, bosses it. So I think that front three makes the most sense to me. But what's great is that we have players across all 3 of those positions who are able to step in when it counts. So if we're talking about Sam Kerr, we're not really confident she's going to be able to play back-to-back 90-minute games. But then you've got a Holly McNamara who can come in and offer the same sort of speed and running in behind that Sam Kerr can do. But if you don't want that style of forward, then you've got a Michelle Heyman, who's a more traditional poaching goal scorer who can be big and bring the ball down and link with other players coming in behind. You've got other wingers. You've got, as mentioned before, Carly Johnson. You've got a Caitlin Torpey who plays as a winger. You've got all these different options to like not have to put the burden on that starting 3 and tire them out before it really matters.
What I love about the balance with the front 3 is like who's the next, say if you're going to pick a second 11, who would be the next 3? That's a really interesting discussion. And who are going to be the impact players that come in off the bench, depending on what's happening in the game. So I feel like that's pretty well, you know, like we've got a lot of options in that regard. I do like, you know, biased. I do like having Michelle Heyman in the squad because she just, you know, if you've got a congested box with a team potentially like Iran that's sitting really deep in a group stage game and you need a goal, like she is always in the right spot in the box. She always knows how to get it in with her feet, with her head, with any body part that needs to happen. It'll go into the back of the net. So I feel like having her in the squad as a natural goal scorer just brings so much comfort to me anyway.
I think it's really, I'm glad how naturally that conversation just went into the areas up front. And if I look at the biggest evolution of the squad over the last few years, if you think back to the absolute, the hysteria of when Sam got injured in 2023, it was like a game of Kaplunk. Like the whole team then shifted from there and it was like, what's the solution? But you look at it here and you've actually got a squad of attackers who all bring a specific skill set depending on the situation. You just rattle them off. I'm not going to repeat them. Remy Simpson as well into the mix. So you've actually got a really tactical kind of selection. I don't know who was missing behind that maybe would have been close, but what I can almost see is it almost been like putting a matrix of skills down. We need to have all these in the squad, and he's probably covered most of them. So I think that's really, really positive, and it means if Sam Kerr is, heaven forbid, injured, but again, if you need to change things up and also protect her, because you can't play all of a sudden out of nowhere 6 games in 20-odd days, the alternatives are great. Particularly, I think it's a great stage for Holly McNamara. It's her time. So it's going to be really exciting to see that as well.
I tell you what, it's probably like terrible that she had a terrible, 2 years, Sam Kerr, but it's almost been the best thing that's happened for this Matildas squad. Like they had to learn what life looked like without her, and everyone had to learn how to stand up and play. There are other options for passing when you're going forward, other options to look for in the box, other ways to create goals. So, whilst it was horrible for her, it's been good overall, probably in the long run for the team.
Well, Sam, have you made your mind up on the formation over the last 15 minutes?
Just like Joe Montemurro, Dave, my formation is fluid. I just... It really depends. It depends on what's going to happen in each game. And I think this conversation has shown that like we actually can play all those different formations if we want to. We've got the players to do it. We've got the depth and the flexibility and the versatility to be able to play whatever formation is required. And Montemurro said as much in his press conference this morning. Like, versatility and the ability to adapt to all scenarios was part of the thinking behind choosing these players as well. So I'm not going to answer that question. I am going to wait for the tournament to validate my fluidity.
Leave it to the experts.
We put Sam in the pundit role and suddenly she's giving me no comment. You're a journalist. You know I need an answer. I've had a great time chatting to you guys over the last little while. It's more of a Matildas sort of squad analysis and a full tournament preview, but I just will finish off by, I'm not going to ask you if they're going to win it, because clearly that's what we're all rooting for. But what's a KPI? What's pass? And what are you expecting?
I think the absolute minimum has to be a semi-final. Not just because there are very high stakes on them reaching a semi-final, which is qualifying for the World Cup in Brazil, but because that is the standard that the Matildas have set in terms of continental football now. You know, they finished in the top 4 during the Women's World Cup. They bombed out in the quarterfinals of the Asian Cup, and it caused basically Australian soccer to break down. But before that, you know, they were consistently inside the top 4. So I think a semi-final has to be the first KPI. But I think there is a greater expectation from people who are watching the Matildas keenly that they get to the final, because this is a team, particularly the core squad, this golden generation of players. This is going to be their last shot to win an Asian Cup, and particularly to win a major title on home soil. And so I think those added expectations and pressures are going to mean that people are wanting them to reach a final. And like, I think they're capable of doing it. I have confidence in this Matildas team to get all the way if all the cards around them fall well and fall in their favour, and they are consistent and they rotate their team and they're adaptable and flexible with what's in front of them. I think they can go all the way.
I'm gonna, I know we went out in the quarterfinals last tournament, so this could be dangerous. I really feel like this squad would see it as a failure if they don't win the whole thing. Like, I think Football Australia, a lot of people, even the lay fans would say, you should win this tournament. And I really do think we've got the squad, the team, the coaching staff to do that. It's going to be hard. Don't get me wrong. Like, we're not just going to waltz through till it's done and win it. But it is going to be, I feel like this squad would believe that they can win this game. This tournament, I believe that they can win it. They'll need a few things to fall in their favour, but they've got the talent to do it. Beyond that, what's a more realistic thing? Probably making the final. You come up against a tough team, you might lose that one, but I think we'll be wanting to come home with a trophy. Stay home with a trophy. Leave with a trophy.
Stay home, yeah.
Stay home
with the trophy.
Yeah.
Guys, great
Dave?
stuff.
Dave, you've got to say something. Yeah, you've got to make a prediction here.
Yeah. Well, no, anything less than the semis is it? Like you talked about, what did you say? Cause a crisis earlier. Like that'll be. I don't want to think about that. I think generally the general public kind of sleeps on the quality of a tournament like this. The expectation is probably that Matildas will win it and they'll waltz through it, as you said. This is the chance. This is the moment. Like, it's the moment. You have to seize it. And I think the squad's good enough. I've talked myself into it too, just actually dissecting it. I think it's got a really good balance. And I think Joe Montemurro's really switched on for the opportunity that's there. So it's absolutely that they can win it. But like, as you look at you run into Japan, or you have you get a really stubborn group game, and suddenly you have to deal with the tension. Like, it is not going to be straightforward. That is one thing I can say, really with certainty. Guys, thanks so much for your time. That was awesome. That flew past, and got us nice and excited for the tournament. Look forward to reading your work, Sam, across Guardian and ESPN, and Ash all over Paramount Plus. It's going to be brilliant.
Yep, can't wait. I'm all hyped now. I don't really want to wait until the tournament to start.
I've got a bit of work to do before then. I can wait the 10 days, to be honest with you. We've got to get there first. No, thanks for your time, guys. And to everyone listening out there, I hope you enjoyed that analysis. Football360.com.au and our social channels and the Women's Game social channels will have wall-to-wall coverage of the Women's Asian Cup, not just the Matildas games, across the board over the next month or so. We can't wait to bring it to you. And until the next podcast, enjoy your football and enjoy the tournament.